Hi, so this is my second video where I am working through the process or reflecting on the process of using trauma-focused therapy, specifically EMDR, to deal with my complex PTSD. It's been a little while since I posted my first video, and that's because I've been going through some transitions, and I've also been laying the groundwork with my therapist to begin reprocessing these memories. So today we did our first traumatic memory reprocessing. Before this, I've had about 5 or 6 sessions to lay the groundwork to get ready for this. And so we did things like creating a safe space in my mind that I can go to, creating a place to store the traumatic memories so that it's not something that's overwhelming or that is invasive or just comes at me, that there's a place where I can put it and then deal with things a little bit at a time. I also recently moved. So I moved out of my boyfriend's house and moved into my own apartment because I really needed my own space. And I felt the need to have a quiet, safe place that was created by me, for me. This is the first time I've ever lived alone. I am almost 40 years old, and I've never had the opportunity to live alone because I went from being a child to having a child, and that child just moved out recently. So, okay, so the getting into the EMDR session, my therapist uses paddles instead of the actual eye movement. I wasn't really sure if that was going to be good, but it actually worked out fine. And so these paddles are just little small, less than palm sized things that you hold one in each hand. She said some people even put them under their arms or whatever. Basically, you just need one on the right side of your body and one on the left side of your body, and they vibrate. So instead of having it going, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with your eye, it goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with the vibration in your hand, which, from what she's telling me, does the same thing as doing the actual eye movement. So that's what we're using right now. I decided to go with a pretty early memory and focus on something that I think is one of the things at the root of my disordered eating. I'm pretty significantly overweight, and there are 2 reasons for that. 2 obvious reasons actually. 1, I don't move enough, right? And 2, I tend to binge eat. So I eat healthy most of the time, but then I will eat due to emotions. And so being hungry is actually a trigger for me. And the reason is because growing up, I was extremely poor, and there were many times that we didn't have enough food. So what I tend to do is when I feel hungry, I just sort of eat like the first thing that I like, which tends to be, not necessarily the healthiest choice. It tends to be some sort of carb or sweet or something like that. And then that sends me spiraling into sweet cravings and carb cravings and things for the rest of the day. So that's something that I want to work on. I want to have a healthier relationship with food and a more measured response to being hungry. So that's where we started, and I got to choose where I wanted to start, and so that's what I started. I started with, though I have many memories of being denied food, primarily because we were poor and also because my mother just didn't provide for us the way that she should have. We were on food stamps, and she would go, buy tons of luxury food items with the food stamps, and then by the end of the month we were down to like popcorn or whatever, canned green beans or whatever nasty stuff we had, right? So I focused on my first memory of being very, very hungry, my stomach cramping, and my mother being angry at me for basically complaining about this and saying that I was hungry and asking for food. In this particular memory, she was making some food for us. I don't remember what it was, but she was telling me I needed to wait. But clearly, if I was at that level of hunger, I hadn't had enough food that day, because it wasn't just like a little stomach grumbly kind of thing. It was horrible cramps in my stomach because I was really, really, really hungry. So if any of you have ever gone without food for long periods of time, you might know what I mean. So what we did is we focused on an image that I associate with that memory, and for me it's my mother's angry face. And then we went through a series of processing activities. So the first was to identify what the problem was at that time, and the problem was that I wasn't getting my basic needs met. So, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, shelter, kind of important. And actually, the place that we were living in was a fire trap. It was very dangerous. So neither my food nor shelter needs were being met appropriately there. I was 5 years old when this specific memory happened. So this is a very old memory for me. So we focused first on sort of coming back to that memory, how I felt, having a visualization of that memory, and then saying I'm not getting my needs met, all of this sort of in my head. And then while I'm doing this, she's, the paddles are vibrating left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, very quickly. And then we went through sort of like a whole process of, what am I feeling? Where am I feeling it in my body? Focus on that feeling, focus on where that is in the body. And it was really fascinating because this is not a memory that tends to make me emotional anymore, because like I said, it is very old. It's just something that's sort of there. But I was surprised at how emotional I became as I was reprocessing this. I definitely cried for, some part of it. And then I was feeling, what was it? Anger, I think, was what came up after. I felt, well, first it was like frustration, and sort of powerlessness. And then once that came up, it was anger, a lot of anger. And I could feel it in different parts of my body. And it was really interesting because as we continued along with the process and we would focus on the different emotions coming up and the different parts of my body where I was feeling those emotions, I felt it move, like physically move through my body. And so first it started coming up. And I actually started feeling nauseated, not to the point where I would throw up, but I felt not nauseated. And then part of it went down. Like I started feeling it in my lower gut. So it was almost like I was processing it through my digestive system, which is really interesting. There were a few more places where I ended up feeling it in my body. And we sort of, would go through each one of those feelings until it would just sort of dissipate. And then we checked back in about how sort of emotionally intense I was feeling, coming back to that memory fully again. And I found that it was almost completely gone. Like I didn't really have an emotion with it anymore once I processed through the fear and the frustration and anger and helplessness that I felt as a child. And I think the anger also is something that's built up in me over many years, being an adult and raising a child and knowing, like, feeding your kid is kind of parenting 101, right? And feeding your kid healthy foods and feeding them regularly is kind of parenting 101. So anyway, then we did an affirmation that was sort of like an opposite of the what wasn't happening. So I wasn't getting my needs met. And so, the affirmation that I decided to replace that with is that I can meet my needs. I can meet my physical needs. And so then what we did is we would think about the image again, my mom's angry face, and I would replace the words "I'm not getting my needs met" with "I can meet my needs." And then I felt like tension coming through my body, and I had to process that. And we're not really sure exactly what that is. She said, perhaps there's like, some other memories or some other feelings that are kind of blocking me being able to completely release that. But I still got to a level where I felt pretty confident in being able to say that I can meet my needs. It was draining for sure. And actually, I kind of set myself up for it being very intense. It was maybe subconscious, maybe it was definitely subconscious, I think. But I didn't know what I was going to try to process when I went in, especially since this was my first session doing the actual processing. But like I said, I just moved into a new place, so I was running around this morning unpacking my kitchen and setting up my kitchen, and I ended up just drinking coffee. So by the time I got to my therapist's office at 11:30, I was really, really hungry. And so that's probably why I decided to choose that. And it actually made it far more intense because I was having the feeling that triggers me as I was working through that traumatic experience. I don't know that that's necessarily the best thing for everybody to do because it's pretty intense, but I do feel like it was very effective. The thing that came out of that session was, sort of a mantra for me to respond and not react, right? So respond to my needs, don't react to them. Don't have some sort of emotional rash, impulsive reaction to my needs, have a plan and respond appropriately. So we're going to continue working on that and lots of other issues. What I did afterwards is I went and treated myself to sushi, very healthy. I just had nigiri and some seaweed salad and green tea. And then I went to the grocery store and I bought enough food for the next few days. And I did notice while I was there that I didn't make any impulse buys, and I wasn't really craving junk food or sweets or sort of things that I might eat on impulse. I got a lot of good, healthy foods and lots of little things that I can snack on, like, like good things like almonds and fruit and things like that are good for me. So that's how my first EMDR session went. I am also journaling, writing, in order to kind of keep a record of what I've worked through and how I felt about it. And, I know this isn't something that like, where I'm just going to be, cured of disordered eating now. But I do feel like that this therapy was very, very different from anything that I've ever done before. And I felt relieved afterwards. I felt a little discombobulated and I still feel a little off, but I feel relieved that I no longer have that emotional memory associated with that very early memory of being denied food when I was hungry. And I'm hoping that as I continue to process these kinds of memories, that I'm just going to become less and less emotionally attached to the trauma that happened to me in the first 20 years. And as I let go of it, that I'll be able to see more of who I am and who I'm meant to be, even though that's happening right before I turn 40 years old. So more to come from my new place. And I took a bath today and brushed my teeth and everything, did yoga. So I'm in a much better place than I was in my last video. But, not gonna lie, I have very little confidence that I'm going to remain in this great place forever. So I'm sure that that there will be some level of regression at some point, although I really wish that wouldn't happen. So again, if you have questions about this, you want to leave comments, or something you want me to discuss having to do with this in my next video, please do so, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.